Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Secretary for Environment and Ecology Ted Chin-wen said 50% of people have used the government's designated bin bags under the Municipal Solid Waste Charging Demonstration Scheme. Authorities earlier selected 14 locations in the city to be part of the demonstration scheme launched last Monday. Mimom Sangai reports.
The government has postponed the municipal solid waste charging scheme to August 1st. Last week, a waste charging demonstration scheme was launched at 14 selected locations, including restaurants, public housing estates, shopping malls, and so-called free new buildings, which are private buildings that do not have owners, corporations, or residents' organizations, and do not engage property management companies. Authorities said the purpose of the demonstration scheme is to examine the problems that may arise during the implementation of the waste charging scheme in August. Speaking on the TVB program, Secretary for Environment and Ecology Ted Chin-wen said during the first week of the demonstration scheme, about 80 or 90% of participants went forward to get the designated garbage bags, but only 20 to 50% of them actually used the bags to dispose of their solid waste. Ted said the participants mentioned two issues that popped up during the trial. The 20-litre designated garbage bags are too small for some bins, and food waste collection points for the three new buildings are located far away. Ted said the current recycling facilities in Hong Kong can barely cover 80 to 90% of the population. He admitted it will be a technical challenge to double the number of facilities before August. As to whether the waste charging scheme will be dropped, the Secretary said authorities will later conduct a survey before deciding on the next step to take. However, he stressed that the government values the opinions of the public. The per capita municipal solid waste disposal rate in 2022 saw a slight increase year-on-year. They added there are still other ways for the government to promote waste reduction in the city, saying the waste charging scheme will not be the only methods. News 9, TVB News.
The government plans to develop Hong Kong into a regional intellectual property trading center. Financial Secretary Paul Chan says the authorities will introduce tax concessions and improve the copyright ordinance to help achieve the goal. The Financial Secretary says in his blog post the government will introduce the Patent Box Incentive. The tax rate for qualifying profits derived from patents will be reduced from the current 16.5% to 5%. It is hoped that the measure will encourage the industry to proactively engage in research and development and possess more intellectual property rights with strong market potential. The Transport and Logistics Bureau earlier withdrew the funding application to the Legislative Council for the Trunk Road T4 in Sha Tin. This as the artery's estimated cost has risen past $7.1 billion. The Bureau explained on the social media page again that the funding hike was due to a slew of factors, including inflation, rise in the cost of material, and workers' pay. The latest estimate of the construction cost now doubles the initial proposed cost. Around half the project's budget at around $3.7 billion is earmarked for building the underground tunnel and bridges. And 20% of the cost will be for soundproof measures and other works to improve the surrounding environment. The Bureau said the project will help divert traffic and save $500 million in social costs every year. Premier Li Qiang said China and the United States need to respect each other and should be partners, not adversaries, as he met U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Yellen now on a visit to Beijing to try to help manage Washington's complex economic relationship with China says conversations at all levels of government led to a more stable footing over the past year. David Garrett reports.
Janet Yellen front and centre, leading the US delegation in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. The US Treasury Secretary was welcomed by Premier Li Qiang. They shook hands, paused for cameras amid huge media interest in Yellen's trip since she arrived.
I believe that over the past year, we've put our bilateral relationship on a more stable footing. This is not meant ignoring our differences or avoiding tough conversations. It has meant understanding that we can only make progress if we directly and openly communicate with one another.
Yellen came to China with at least one eye on trade practices that America says puts its companies and workers at an unfair competitive disadvantage. Li agrees they are moving in the right direction. Under the strategic guidance of the two presidents, the China-US relationship is stabilizing, Lee said. Secretary, you are the first American cabinet member to visit China this year, and your visit has indeed drawn a lot of attention in society. China sincerely hopes the two countries will be partners, not adversaries, and our two sides need to respect each other, coexist in peace, and pursue win-win cooperation. After talks over the last few days, there is a framework in place.
Earlier this week in Guangzhou, Vice Premier He and I announced important steps that will contribute to addressing challenges in our economic relationship, including making sure that our workers and firms compete on a level playing field, as we also deepen cooperation on shared concerns like illicit finance.
Yellen went for talks with Beijing's mayor, Yin Yong. They both spoke about American companies operating within the capital. Yin told Yellen those companies have shared in opportunities provided by China's economic growth and have also contributed to rapid development. David Garrett, TVB News.
Sunday marks 6 months since Palestinian groups led by Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th last year, unleashing an Israeli response that has cost more than 33,000 lives. On Saturday, Israel's military said it had recovered the body of a 47-year-old farmer who was held hostage in Gaza, one of more than 100 still held by Hamas. This as negotiators prepare for another round of talks in Cairo for a ceasefire and the release of hostages. Around 1,200 people in Israel were reportedly killed on October 7th and 250 hostages taken, around half of them freed in November. Nasvi Karim with more.
This is baby Massa, born on October 7th, 2023 in northern Gaza. She is as old as the war, but among the fortunate ones. Many babies have not survived Israeli airstrikes. Now in Zuwayda in central Gaza, Massa's mother says the future offers little hope. The house is gone, there's no life now. I can't imagine how we will get back to the north of Gaza to find houses without electricity, water and sewage, she says. There is no house in the first place. We will get back to tents. In Israel, families of hostages still held by Hamas wait in hope that their loved ones will be released. Meirav Leisham Gonan is the mother of 23-year-old hostage Romy Gonan. She thought her daughter would be gone just a couple of days.
When I think of Romy in the night or in the morning or whenever it stops for a minute, first I know she might be very angry at me because I didn't do my job as a mother to get her back soon.
As relatives marked 6 months of captivity for their loved ones, Israel said it had recovered the body of 47-year-old farmer Elad Katzir, who was taken from the border town near Oz on October 7th. It comes as a Hamas delegation led by Deputy Chief in Gaza, Khalil al-Hayya, was on its way to Cairo for ceasefire talks. Hamas is standing firm in its demands for a permanent ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, and return of displaced Palestinians to their homes. Israel wants only a temporary ceasefire. Meanwhile, a team from the World Health Organization has gained access to the devastated Shifa hospital in Gaza City, which was recently subjected to a 2-week raid by Israeli forces. The WHO said numerous shallow graves and many partially buried bodies were found just outside the emergency department after the Israeli siege.
We're standing here where it used to be the front of the hospital, and we're in the front of the emergency room behind me, where ambulances used to bring the cases. Now, all the area is destroyed in addition to the hospital, and in addition to that, the dead bodies are still underneath us. We can smell the death out while we're standing here.
Nazri Karim, TVB News.
A pro-Russian candidate has won Slovakia's presidential election. Peter Pellegrini won more than 53% of the vote against nearly 47% for pro-Western opposition candidate Ivan Korchok. The 48-year-old Pellegrini addressed supporters following his win. He is a close ally of populist Prime Minister Robert Fico. Fico, who has turned the country's foreign policy to more pro-Russian views. Pellegrini of the Voice Party becomes Slovakia's sixth president since the splitting of Czechoslovakia in 1993. The win cemented Fico's grip on power by giving him and his allies control of major strategic posts. Pellegrini said the government would now have support in its policies and not have to face an opposition opportunistic power center. Welcome back. Mexico has severed diplomatic ties with Ecuador after Ecuadorian police broke into the Mexican embassy in Quito to arrest a former Ecuadorian vice president who had been seeking asylum since last December. Latin American governments have rallied around Mexico since the raid on Friday, and Nicaragua has also cut ties with Ecuador. Tracy Furness has more.
Protesters waved flags and held placards outside Ecuador's embassy in Mexico City on Saturday, protesting the actions of Ecuadorian police breaking into the Mexican embassy in Quito to arrest former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glass, who has been residing there since December. It is a delicate situation that borders are crossed, international law is violated, this protester said. Using force, the Ecuadorian police broke through the external doors of the embassy to arrest Glass, who was seeking asylum at the embassy after being indicted on corruption charges. According to Glass's attorney, officers broke into his room and he resisted arrest. Officers knocked him down to the floor, kicked him in the spine, legs and hands. When he couldn't walk, they dragged him out. On Saturday, Glass was taken by armoured vehicle from the Attorney General's office to the airport, where he boarded an aircraft for a flight to the port city of Guayaquil, where he will remain in custody at a maximum security prison. The raid prompted Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador to announce the breaking of diplomatic relations with Ecuador. Mexico's Foreign Affairs Secretary Alicia Bárcena said, given the flagrant and serious violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, in particular the principle of inviolability of Mexican diplomatic premises and personnel and the basic norms of international coexistence, Mexico announces the immediate breaking of diplomatic relations with Ecuador. South American leaders condemned the incident. Honduran President Xiomara Castro wrote on X that the raid was an intolerable act for the international community. The Organization of American States reminded its members, which include Mexico and Ecuador, of their obligation to not invoke norms of domestic law to justify non-compliance with their international obligations. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
6 people are still missing after a 7.2 magnitude earthquake hit Hualien County in Taiwan last Wednesday. 13 people have been killed in the disaster. Some shop tenants from the Uranus building are not pleased because local authorities have so far denied them compensation. Mimosa Ngai reports.
The 7.2 magnitude earthquake in Taiwan damaged many constructions, including the Uranus building, which was left tilting at dangerous angles. The demolition work of the Uranus building started on Friday. It was expected to be completed in 2 weeks. However, the demolition work has not been smooth due to the constant aftershocks. While authorities tried to insert 6 steel bars to stabilize the base of the building, the plan did not work out. This man, Hong, used to run an alcohol and tobacco shop on the ground floor of the Uranus building before the earthquake. He has lost more than $1 million after the incident. He said authorities are discussing compensation with landlords, but the plan does not include tenants. Why does everything have to prioritize homeowners when it comes to compensation? Have I not paid business tax over the past 10 years or so? Meanwhile, Taiwanese rescue teams rescued 305 people who were trapped at Silk's Place Taroko Hotel. A Turkish rescue team also arrived in Hualien to join the operation. The team used drones to assist in the search for at least 5 missing individuals, including 2 Singaporean tourists. Mimosa 9, TVB News.
Former Taiwan leader Ma Ying-jeou wrapped up his Xi'an itinerary and headed to Beijing on the last leg of his 11-day trip to the mainland. The former chairman of the Kuomintang Party, leading a youth delegation from Taiwan, visited the Shanxi History Museum and the giant wild goose pagoda. He said it's the task of both mainland and Taiwanese residents to preserve the ancient texts and historical artifacts, which are treasures from the Chinese civilization. He then visited the Datsun Temple and greeted some tourists from Taiwan before boarding a high-speed train to Beijing. Secretary for Security Chris Tang says some young people were brainwashed and incited during the 2019 social unrest to take part in anti-government acts. With that, Tang said national education is all the more pivotal for the new generation to understand about the country and the importance of national security. Organized by the police, the Hong Kong Island Region National Security Education Sharing Day invited 3 incumbent and former commissioners of police to take part in the event. They include Secretary for Security Chris Tang, current Commissioner of Police Raymond Siu, and Dick Lee, now the Executive Director of the Hong Kong Institute for Public Administration. Also in attendance were more than 100 members of junior and senior police call schemes.
Participating in this event is very fun and meaningful, and for me as a teenager it's very significant to know about the national security, and this event have made me understood more about how the system works.
Apart from this sharing day, there will also be visits to the Legislative Council and the Hong Kong Museum of Coastal Defense as part of the campaign. In a sharing, Chris Tang said while he was serving as a police chief, he learned that some young people have been brainwashed during the 2019 social unrest to engage in anti-government and violent acts. He said he had more chances to talk with young people arrested for related offenses and found that many of them regret what they did. The security chief said strengthening national education would help prevent young people from being incited in future. April 15th will mark the first National Security Education Day after legislation on Article 23 of the Basic Law came into force. When asked by a JPC member about how the government can promote the national security laws, Commissioner of Police Raymond Siu said seeing is believing and more opportunities should be given to young people to travel up north. Dick Lee meanwhile referred to China's history, pointing out how Chinese people suffered when the country was invaded by foreign powers, which underscored the importance of national security. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.